Hiya, neighbor. How you feeling?
Not a penny.
Oh, now, come on. Herbie, did I ask you for any money?
You got that look in your eye.
Oh, no, listen, you cleaned me out in that crap game, didn't you?
You gave me a lesson, that's all I know.
Oh, do me a favor. Loan me $50.
Schmitty, I can't. I can't lend you $50.
Oh, yes, you can.
No, I can't. All I got is $40, that's all.
All right, give me the $40 and you owe me 10.
Okay, I owe you 10.
That's right.
How come I owe you 10?
But what did I ask you for?
50.
And how much did you give me?
40.
So you owe me $10.
That's right. But you owe me 40.
Now, don't change the subject.
I'm not changing the subject. You're trying to change my finances. Come on now, give me my $40.
All right, there's your $40.
Okay.
Now, give me the $10 you owe me.
I'm paying you on account.
On account.
On account, I don't know how I owe it to you.
That's the way you feel about it? It's the last time I'll ever ask you for the loan of $50.
Wait a minute, Smitty. How can I loan you $50 now? All I have is 30.
Well, give me the 30 and you owe me 20.
Okay, this is getting worse all the time. First I owe him 10, now I owe him 20.
Well, why do you run yourself into debt?
I'm not running in, you're pushing me.
I can't help it if you can't handle your finances. I do all right with my money.
Hey, you're doing all right with mine, too.
Now, wait a minute. I asked you for the loan of $50. You gave me 30. So you owe me $20. 20 and 30 is 50.
No. 25 and 25 is 50.
All right, here's your $30.
Okay.
Now, give me back the 20 you owe me. Fine guy. Won't loan a pal $50.
How can I loan you 50? All I got now is 10.
Oh, wait a minute. To show you that I'm your pal, you want to double that?
Go ahead. See you later. Go
Wait a
on.
minute. I don't want that kind of money. On the up and up. Hold it. Now, take a number. Any number at all from 1 to 10. And don't tell me.
I got it.
Was the number odd or even?
Even.
Was the number between 1 and 3?
No.
Between 3 and 5?
No. I think I got him.
Between 5 and 7?
Yeah.
Number 6.
Right. How did he do that?
As I drive around our city, I regularly see advertisements posted at multiple intersections posing the question, are you in debt? I'm sure you've noticed them as well. There we sit just trying to get to work or get to school or go to the grocery store or wherever we need to go. And maybe we're just listening to a catchy tune on Sirius Radio, and suddenly this haunting question hits us. Are you in debt? And they offer phone numbers and websites and all kinds of consolidation loans to help us get out of our debt dilemma. Call me, they promise, and I'll help you get out of debt quick. Really? Debt. It can keep us awake at night wondering how we're going to rearrange our meager finances to make all the insurmountable and never-ending payments. We dread the threatening phone calls. We dread the letters. We hate paying the toll it exacts on our most precious relationships as we get into arguments over our finances. Debt. It can feel like the proverbial 500-pound monkey on our backs, bending our shoulders, breaking our wills, cramping our dreams, and incessantly whispering reminders in our ears of our failures. It is a nagging nuisance that only intensifies over time and never seems to get better on its own. Debt. It can bring guilt and shame because, admit it or not, we're often the blameworthy ones. For we've tried to keep up with all the toys and the trinkets and the technologies that are promoted as must-haves. We've all made purchases based on an impulsive whim. We've financed on credit. We've fallen to the temptation to buy now and pay later. We can feel like we're our own worst enemies. Debt. If it took years to fall into debt, can we really expect to climb out of it quickly and easily? If we don't develop a new perspective on our finances, if we don't learn new skills to handle our resources, will we not keep repeating the same old mistakes and find ourselves perpetually in debt? We've been working through our series, a sermon series entitled Hard Talks. And we've covered a number of very difficult subjects, ones that are hard to talk about and yet we need to address them in some way. We've talked about parenting and anxiety and depression, forgiveness issues, sexual issues, social media. And today we're going to talk about debt. These are difficult topics, but we have to wrestle them in some way and bring some understanding to our situation. They're critical because we need to thrive in our very challenging cultural context in which we find ourselves. We do believe that the Word of God provides wisdom for all facets of life. It is the truth of God, and it speaks truth into our broken world that denies the reality of objective truth and objective reality. And we're covering all these issues, and there's many more that we could actually cover, but they're important to address in some way. We believe that the light of the gospel of Jesus needs to be brought into our darkened understanding so that we can address these issues. So with God's help and with His strength and with His wisdom, we're going to do that today. We're going to deal with debt by finding God's way out of the jungle of bill payments and try to get that monkey off our backs. So, is the debt monkey really a problem? What's the big deal? Is there truly an issue here? So glad to have Ted. I know you are a friend of Renew. You were involved in were you ever involved at Grace Community Church for a little bit?
Yeah, I've actually been involved with Bartley and the team there since 1997.
Okay, super. So from the very beginning then. And then you also attended the Milton campus for a little bit?
Yes.
Excellent.
What was formerly the Village campus, but it's now the Renew Milton campus, yes.
So your history goes way back.
Yeah, and then we went to Grasslands in Alberta, and now we're down in Nevada, working full-time with Assist Church Expansion.
Perfect. That's great. Now, what training and experience do you have in dealing with debt issues, Ted?
When I was in the U.S., I was a CPA and had a small tax practice on the side. I was also a former IRS agent, so I understood taxes and how things worked.
You had lots of friends, I'm sure.
But that didn't save me from getting into debt at a very early age of life. And in the early 90s, my pastor approached me and asked me to teach a debt-free living course. Of course, I felt a little hypocritical doing that since I wasn't living one myself.
Okay.
And after studying the applications and the material, and as I began to teach it, I began to live it. And within about 5 years, Elise and I had become totally debt-free, which allowed us in 1997 to go into full-time Christian service, and I was able to leave my job because I needed so little money to live on by then.
Okay, neat. That's a great story. So, from your perspective, how is debt affecting Christians in general and specifically Canadians? Do you know from a Canadian standpoint how debt is affecting us?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not too different on either sides of the border. And if you go onto the StatsCan website, you can get all kind of information and statistics and see that the average Canadian family overall is carrying about $114,000, $115,000 in debt. And of course, those numbers are even higher in British Columbia, Alberta, and Ontario. So it is a big issue. It's something the government tracks, and the majority of families are carrying substantial debt. And of course, it affects different groups, such as single moms, single parent families are in debt for greater than, let's say, a couple who have two incomes. But that's another reason is we have two incomes is to really service our debt load.
Okay, so should debt be a concern for Christians? Is that something that we just need to live with, and that's just part of modern society, or is that something that we should be concerned about?
I definitely think we should be concerned about it because it's such a large part of our family's budget. that if you can get rid of the debt, you can put that money into an investment strategy or retirement or an asset accumulation instead of having it suck the life out of your budget and force you to earn more money than you actually need to live on. It's a concern for all of us, and I think it also doesn't seem to have a distinction in whether you're in a church or you're not in a church. We seem to have the same amount of debt and the same amount of problems with people in and out of the church. So I think it's definitely a concern. And one of the biggest problems is, I think, in the area of contentment. I know when Elise and I were young, we kind of had this, I got to have it and I got to have it now. And so we were replacing the word need, in there when we really just wanted it. So once we learned to defer that instant gratification, it became easier to save up money for 6 to 8 months and then buy something with cash instead of immediately going out and charging it and then have to pay almost 1.5 times what we would have paid because of all the high interest.
Okay, so it was learning to be content or to wait until you had the resources to be able to purchase what you needed.
Yes.
Okay.
Defer that instant desire to want to have it right now.
Yeah, right.
And just work toward, you'll even appreciate what it is you got a lot more when you had to wait for it and put away for it.
Okay, and you can enjoy it more because you know it's paid for.
Yes.
And then when it breaks or it becomes obsolete, you're not upset because you're still paying for it.
Exactly right.
Sounds good. What are the common reasons and motivations that Christians fall into debt? And it's probably across the board, not just for Christians, but it could be for anybody.
Yes, and it is. I mean, like I said, debt doesn't seem to be an unchurched problem. It seems to be a problem nationwide, and we all have the situation. I mean, there are times when we actually need to have debt, and that's early on in our lives, in our careers. Not too many people can afford to go right out and buy a car, right, or to purchase a home without a mortgage. Of course, you could buy a smaller car or a used car, which maybe you might be able to afford, and you could buy a smaller home, a starter home, that you could then, when you go to flip it over, you can have that much more equity to take into the next home, right, and keep your debt low. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, we need very little when you think about food, shelter, clothing, that kind of thing, what our real needs are. But then there's all of these wants that turn into needs. And, we have to have the latest iPhone. We have to have the latest laptop. We have to have the 7,000 channel, high definition digital, whatever. I mean, we start turning these things, and the next thing we know, these things we're charging are starting to take a big chunk out of our paycheck, and then we have the need to earn more or to find another source of income, and so we start buying lottery tickets, which is really just another money pit. And so the reasons that we have really are kind of our own, because we get this feeling when we use our credit cards that somehow it's free, and we end up paying for it for a very long time at 18 or plus interest rates, and that's the killer, right? It's that consumer debt that really eats away at your ability to accumulate wealth and to save for retirement and things like that.
Right. And those days do come, right?
Yes, they will.
Retirement does.
Sooner than you think.
That's what I'm realizing. And you have to have some kind of a plan or a strategy in place. And I've heard people talk about good debts and bad debts. Is there such a thing as good debts and bad debts?
As long as you think there's a good leak in your gas tank, then there could be good debt. There is necessary debt at certain points of your life when there is no other way to to have a home or something like that, and financing is a necessity. But even if we finance something, we should try to pay it off sooner than following just the regular amortization schedule. When Elise and I had gotten rid of our consumer debt and we started attacking our mortgage, we were able to pay it off in about 3 years. So it took us about 2 years to pay off the consumer debt, and then we focused everything on the mortgage. And when you're sending in additional principal payments as much as is allowed by your bank, it's a little different in Canada than the U.S. You can really cut down on the amount of interest you're paying, and every payment after that goes more and more toward principal. So a good and bad debt, I wouldn't necessarily say any debt is good, but sometimes it's necessary.
Does the Word of God have anything to say about debt? Is there anything that the Scriptures can bring to us, God's perspective, that can help us kind of manage this idea?
Yeah, it really, when I first got into this and started looking, I thought it was just going to be some formula for getting out of debt, something that a finance person arranged. But it was from a Christian perspective, and the material that I first got into, and the current material now that's out there with Christian teachers like Dave Ramsey and stuff, they'll point to the Bible, and there's over 2,000 to 2,500 verses, depending on the exact subject you're looking at, that talks about debt and finances and stewardship and all of these issues that are lumped into this area of how we use money. And even Jesus in the New Testament, I think a third of his parables were about finances or about money, and he spoke more about finances and money and this whole area than he did about heaven and hell together. So obviously, God knew beforehand that we were going to need help in this area, and this was going to be a temptation. And he told us that we can't serve two masters. We can't put all of our weight into money and still serve him. And it's not so much that we can't concentrate or focus or accumulate wealth, but that if we love that more than him, we will make it our master. So there is a way to manage it in a Christian way, in a Christian environment, but yet still there's nothing wrong with being wealthy. There's nothing wrong with having wealth. And it's not a sin to have debt, but it's certainly not God's best design that he had for us.
Okay. And there's actually some great spiritual parallels there with the weight of sin, the sin debt, and that Jesus actually canceled that. And that's a huge relief spiritually as well. The Bible speaks about the debt monkey because it's been a problem throughout history. And so let's take a look at the biblical perspective. Psalm 37:21 has these words. The wicked borrow and do not repay, but the righteous give generously. What the scriptures are telling us is that not paying a debt is a sign of an evil heart. And as you're familiar with the scriptures, they often talk about what wisdom looks like and what foolish life looks like, what is good and what is evil. And it is putting this contrast together, saying that the righteous person is a person who has money to give and to share with others, but the wicked person is someone who withholds that. And even when they do borrow from another person, they don't repay it. They hold on to it. The unrighteous person is a person who takes or receives and does not give back. The righteous person, in contrast, though, is someone who receives and will give and will share with others. So not paying a debt indicates an evil heart. The scriptures go on to say that we need to be careful, we need to beware incurring a debt, especially on behalf of others. Listen to Proverbs chapter 22. It says, "Do not be the one who shakes hands in pledge or puts up security for debts. If you lack the means to pay, your very bed will be snatched from under you." And the wisdom of Solomon, the writer of this portion of the Proverbs, is telling us that we need to be so very, very careful about giving money to somebody who is untrustworthy, somebody who is not going to repay us. Because if it's money that we were relying on, money that we need for ourselves, we can find very soon that we're going to find ourselves into trouble. It's almost as if we need to make sure that our boat is floating. Because if our boat is sinking and we try to lend and give money to other people, we're going to find ourselves in trouble, and we're not going to be able to help others as well. So we need to make sure that our boat, our financial boat, stays afloat. We want to be able to share, and that is important, and we all know that there are family members and friends that we know and love and trust. We want to be able to help them. We also need to be careful about lending to those who are untrustworthy. The scriptures go on to say that we are not to love money. And this is a huge issue in our North American society and our culture. We tend to praise those who are wealthy and rich and influential. And there seems to be a goal. People want to become rich. And there are many get-rich schemes and many people trying to give advice on real estate investments and so forth, trying to make a lot of money, and particularly to make it quickly and easily. Here's what Ecclesiastes 5 verse 10 says, "Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. And this too is meaningless." To chase after money, it can't satisfy. A very, very wealthy man of a previous generation was once asked, "How much money is enough?" And his answer was, "Just a little bit more." Never get enough. Here's what Paul writes, and encouraging his young protege Timothy to share with some people who were wealthier in the congregation that he was a part of. He says these words in 1 Timothy chapter 6, "But godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs." The key is to learn contentment, to be grateful for what God has provided for us, and not to always try to keep up with other people or keep up to some expectation or standard which is unrealistic. And we recognize that we have to just be content with having enough food to eat, enough clothes to wear, to be grateful for meeting those basic needs of life. Jesus said this very much himself in his Sermon on the Mount, where he says that no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. And that is an absolute statement from Jesus, our Lord and Savior. You cannot serve both God and money. So we have to make a fundamental choice and to trust God to provide for our needs, but not try to serve both. There is only one debt, really, that the scriptures say we should incur. And that is talked about, Paul talks about it in Romans in a context of discussing about how we are to respond to the authority structures and the government around us. And in Romans 13, Paul says that our only debt should be to owe love to others. That is the only debt we should really have. Here's what he writes. "Give to everyone what you owe them. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. Let no debt remain outstanding." That's basically a a very good principle to live by. Let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another, for whoever loves others has fulfilled the law. Be sure to make sure that the main focus of our lives is to seek to love others, care for others, to serve the Lord in that way, and not to allow debt to creep up on us. Last thing I'm going to just point out from the scriptures here is that it's really important for us to understand the importance of hard work. So many people want to get rich quick, and they want to get rich quick easily. There is no quick fix. There is no easy scheme out there. If there is something out there, beware of it and be careful of it. Work hard to pay off your debts and make it a priority. Proverbs 6, the writer is, in a sense, speaking to his son, speaking to a younger, immature, or inexperienced individual, and is saying these words, "My son, if you have put up security for your neighbor, if you have shaken hands and pledged for a stranger, you have been trapped by what you said, ensnared by the words of your mouth. So do this, my son, to free yourself, since you have fallen into your neighbor's hands. Go to the point of exhaustion," the proverb writer says. Go to the point of exhaustion and give your neighbor no rest. Allow no sleep to your eyes, no slumber to your eyelids. Free yourself free yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, like a bird from the snare of the fowler. Do what you have to do, serve or work hard trying to pay off what you owe, and not to allow yourself to become ensnared, as it says here, like a gazelle, like a wild animal trapped by a hunter, or a bird that is caught by a fowler. Get yourself free. So why do we struggle with debt? Why is this such a problem for us? Much of the difficulty is the fact that it is a cultural expectation for us to pursue wealth and try to get rich. It is what people say. They go to school, they get an education, they want to find a good job, they want to have a good career. Why? So that they can make a lot of money and have all the things that they think will make them happy. And we need to be very, very careful of this cultural expectation. Our culture tells us to spend money on things that enhance our lifestyles. This will make you happy. This will give you the kind of life that you've always dreamed of having. This kind of technology or this kind of possession will truly make you happy. And if it means going into debt to get what we want, then so be it. That's what many people think in our world. We can pay it off later, whenever that might be. And that is the problem. We don't know when that date is going to come. If there's anything left over, then we might save it, but that doesn't usually happen. If there's some money, we're going to spend it in some way. And then to think even about giving generously, which is ultimately what God's goal is for us as believers in Jesus, to be able to give generously, we can't even think about that if we're always paying off our debt and we're always behind on payments. Here's some of the cultural myths that comes up. Part of our consumeristic society in which we live in Western culture and North American culture, and us Canadians, we fall into this just like everybody else. We believe that things bring happiness. If we have all the latest things, all the latest toys, trinkets, and technologies, and somehow we're going to be happy. If we can afford all the trips that we want to go and buy the cars and live in the right neighborhoods, then we're going to be truly, truly happy. Many people believe that debt is expected and unavoidable. Therefore, we need to borrow money. There are some very major things in life, maybe our home, that we may not be able to put down the cash for. But sometimes we extend ourselves and get ourselves into situations where we can't even make the mortgage payments, get ourselves into difficulty. We need to be careful. And then we always think that a little more money will solve all my problems. If I just had a little bit more money, if I could just find a way to make a little more or find a little bit more or find some kind of a scheme that would just help me get over the top, then a lot of my problems would go away. But that never seems to work out for most of us. So there are three spiritual dangers that we are alerted to in the scriptures regarding debt. And here's what they are. Number one, it presumes upon the future. presumes upon the future. James 4 writes these words, "Why? You don't even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes." We're presuming upon the future. We don't know what the future will hold. And if we're always banking on the future, always hoping for that somehow, some way I'm going to find enough money or I can pay it off later, we don't know what's going to happen. And if we don't take care of our responsibilities right now and live within our means right now, we can find ourselves in a whole lot of trouble down the road. Secondly, another spiritual danger of debt is that it denies God the opportunity to teach us to trust Him. Denies God the opportunity to teach us to trust Him, that He is trustworthy. He's promised that He will look after our needs if we continually trust Him and put Him and His kingdom first. Jesus says these words, "For the pagan world runs after all such things, and your Father knows that you need them. But seek His kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well." And so if we're always looking to get rich, always pursuing things that we think will make us happy, but ultimately are empty and vain and meaningless, then we're going to find ourselves pursuing the wrong kingdom. And we want to follow after God's kingdom. We want to pursue His kingdom. We want to be following Jesus and allow God to teach us the opportunity, give us the opportunity to teach us to trust Him in everything. And then lastly, a danger of debt is that it fosters envy and greed. It's so easy to compare with other people, to see what other people have, to see what other people are driving, to see where other people live, to see all the things that they have, to see the trips and vacations that other people are going on, and say, that is something that I want. I need that. It's not just something I want, it's something that I need to have because that's what everybody else has. And we can compare and we can find ourselves falling into the trap of envy and of greed. Here's what Jesus says in that similar passage in Luke chapter 12. He said to them, to his audience, "Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." And as we've seen earlier, we can take none of our possessions with us one day. The only thing that is eternal are people. Those are the eternal treasures that we want to lay up. Our relationships and the people that we serve and that we know and we love, we take care of. Those are the things that we want to invest in the kingdom of God. We don't want to be investing in things that ultimately we'll have to give up anyways. We can't take any of it with us. It's often been said, you never see a U-Haul pulled behind a hearse. The ancient Egyptians tried very hard to take their stuff with them. And it is still there. It's somewhere in a museum. None of them took it with them. You can't do it. So let me touch on 5 areas of debt that we need to be aware of. I'm just going to mention the first 4 because these are areas that you really need to get some counsel and have some accountability on. These are major purchases or major areas where you may need to incur some debt or you may need to talk to somebody who is an expert in these fields. But areas such as your mortgage, purchasing a home, you will need to get some counsel on that. How much should you put towards your mortgage? What is your income and what are you able to afford reasonably? So you want to get some expert advice on that. If you have to purchase a car, needing to purchase a car to get to work or for work, you're going to have to get some counsel on areas of that. For your education, sometimes we have to incur a little bit of debt in order to be able to afford some education, knowing that once we finish our education, we'll be able to make an income with that and go into a career and be able to afford. But be careful of getting ourselves into too much debt. It's always good to learn to balance life and maybe be able to work alongside of your education to be able to pay it off and not to get too far into debt as a result of education. And then sometimes when you're starting up a business, there may be a need to, or it may be a situation where some debt may be a part of the whole scheme there, the whole plan, and you're going to have to get some advice on that. But the one area that I do want to talk about is about credit cards. Credit cards are something that everybody thinks you got to have a credit card, you got to be able to have that. It'll build your credit rating, and that may be true, may be part of it. But as someone has said, some expert said this, there's no wise use of a credit card. That seems to be a very strong thought about those who are dealing with finances and helping to help people get out of debt. There is no wise use of a credit card. That's a pretty serious warning that we need to think about and consider. Studies indicate that family spending increases using a credit card versus cash. There are plenty of studies showing that if we're not sure where all the money's going, if we're just putting money on or putting purchases on a credit card, that we will actually overspend. But if we use cash, we know that when we run out, we've run out, and so we can't go beyond that. Some advice is if you do have to have a credit card, have only one. The danger is having multiple credit cards, and people start to rack up the expenditures on all of them and trying to pay the interest rates on all of them. And so many of the credit cards have such high rates of interest. You have to be so very, very careful, and it is very, very easy to find ourselves in deep debt very, very quickly. And credit card rules, let's say these, I would give you this kind of advice for credit card rules. Use a credit only for budgeted purposes. If you have set down a budget and you know how much you're going to spend on various areas, you can use your credit card, but just up to that credit card. Maybe you want to collect some points, maybe there are some rewards that are part of that, understand that, but recognize that it's only for budgeted purchases. You're not going above and beyond, you're not buying on a whim, you're not just doing it because other people are doing it or because a great opportunity has just suddenly shown up and you need to get make a purchase on that. No, it's something that you've planned for, you've thought about, you're going to purchase it, and it's part of your budget. Always pay the balance in full. If you're able to do that and able to discipline yourself, it can be useful. You don't have to carry around the cash to be able to use a credit card. If you're finding, though, that you cannot pay the balance in full, then you're just going to find yourself paying high rates of interest, and it just gets worse and worse. And the last bit of advice is this: if you violate rule number 1 and rule number 2, if you're not using it for budgeted purposes and you're not paying off the balance in full every month, cut up the cards, get rid of them. It's not going to help you at all. So what are some practical steps we can take to get the debt monkey off our back? Just a last question, and this is probably what our people need to hear the most. What can Christians do to deal with debt, Ted? What practical advice can you give? What kinds of resources are available so that people aren't just drowning and not knowing where to turn? Is there a life preserver or something that they can hold on to get their heads above water and keep it above water?
First, if you're married, you can't do this alone. The husband or the wife can't drag the other one along and expect to get out of debt. It has to be a joint decision and something that you're doing together. Right. So if you're single, get an accountability partner. Get someone you can share what you're doing and will encourage you in that area, because doing it alone is almost impossible. If you're married, of course, you've got to do it together as a team. You can't just one of you do it. The next thing is what I would suggest is that you look around you and just stop doing what everyone else is doing, because when you do what everyone else is doing, you end up like everyone else. So that's the next thing. The second thing is I would look for someone who's been down this road or who has taken one of these courses or who has started a program and is either nearly out of debt or has gotten completely out of debt, and talk to them for some encouragement. The other thing is that our church, Renew Church, has plenty of resources, such as the Dave Ramsey course. We've taught other courses at Renew that have worked on budgeting and finances and debt elimination. But get yourself into one of these programs. They're either a minimal cost for the $20 for the workbook or something, or and just invest in that. Get the resources you need, and the know-how of how to do this, because it is possible. I started teaching this in 1993. I did it myself. I've had people come back and give testimonies of how their life was changed when they got out of debt and how they were able to take a job that they really liked, even though it paid less, because they didn't need as much when you're not servicing debt. So those are the things that I would suggest that somebody do who's really looking to get out of that grind, to get out of that hole, and get away from being part of the 80% and be part of the 20%. And that's what one of the quotes I remember from the Dave Ramsey course is, live like no one else so you can live and give like no one else. And that's kind of what happens, right? You're kind of living against the stream. You're living against the commercialism, and you're focusing your money in a wise way to do more for you, so your money's working for you instead of you working for the money.
Okay, so you're the master of the money as opposed to the money mastering you.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. You have taught the course. You've talked about the course. Which courses have you been involved with that you found good success for people?
When I started out, I was taking a debt elimination course by John Commuta, which was a Christian-based course. I've also taught Master Your Money with Ron Blue, Larry Burkett, and now, of course, the big guru in this area of getting out of debt and living, a debt-free life is Dave Ramsey.
Okay.
And he's just not in the U.S., although he sounds very U.S. to me. You'll need a translator for Southern English, but other than that, he's helped people all around the world. His materials are in Europe and Asia. They're everywhere. He's located all over the place. So, and his Financial Peace University is an excellent thing you can do. You can do it on your own, but I would recommend doing it in a group where you have group accountability.
Yeah, I think in the group setting you can see and hear from other people who have the same struggles, but also help one another and celebrate the successes as you make progress. So good to have that and the encouragement from one another. And also remember that we're not the only ones.
That's right.
There's the 80%.
80%.
80%
are just like you and are living a life like that, and you can be part of the 20%. And I know it sounds like if someone said 5 years, that sounds like a long time, or 7 years. But if you think back 5 years ago, if you had started this in 2013, think about what you were doing in 2013. You're probably still watching the same TV shows you were watching then, the same people in Hollywood. Not that much has changed, but you could have been debt-free had you started just 5 years ago. So it might sound like a lot to invest in, but the time will go pretty quickly, and there's ways of things you can do to make it fun.
Okay. Well, that's been super helpful, Ted. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing a bit of your story and then also your expertise in this area. And I wish you God's blessing on your continued ministry with Assist.
Thank you for having me, and say hi to all of my friends there at Renew.
Will do. All right. Thanks so much, Ted.
Thank you, Brad.
All right. So the debt monkey is real, and it can be really big, bothersome, and burdensome. It will require a hard talk with your spouse or family members because it won't go away on its own. There are resources available to help, and there's always hope, and you are not alone. So let's schedule the hard talk and get that debt monkey off our backs.